Welcome and thanks for pressing play. This episode of WarDocs was made possible by a partnership with the Defense Strategies Institute's OpMed TV and was recorded at the 2024 Operational Medicine Symposium in San Antonio. These interviews focus on optimizing military medicine through the modernization and implementation of policies, education, training, research, and development. We also explore emerging technologies to enhance the health, strength, and survivability of warfighters. Welcome to the special episode of WarDocs in partnership with OpMed TV. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist, and I'm joined today by Dr. Ronald Poropatich. He's a critical care physician, a retired colonel, and he's currently the director for the Center for Military Medicine Research at the University of Pittsburgh. Ron, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Doug. Good to see you.
So you've been involved in this Operational Medicine Conference Symposium for several years.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you got involved and what is the point of the symposium?
Yeah, I retired from the military in 2012 and I wanted to stay current on operational requirements, new problem sets, etc. for my job at the University of Pittsburgh so I could best advise faculty and industry who I partner with on what kinds of programs we should be developing, research proposals that lead to product and solutions for the warfighter. OpMed gives me that kind of perspective. We just had a great session with a senior enlisted corps talking about training of medics and EMTs on the battlefield, and it's that kind of insight from, on that panel, 120 years of experience that just floored me, and I learned so much from them.
Yeah, I think one of the things on WarDocs that I like to always bring up is a quote from Aldous Huxley, which is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, is that the biggest lesson of history is that man doesn't learn the lessons of history. And so part of this conference, I think, is really great opportunity to share some of the lessons learned. Looking around and listening to some of the speakers, what are some of the things you're excited about hearing about and seeing in the exhibit hall?
First, the number of exhibitors is exciting. The number of attendees is exciting. The number of attendees in uniform is exciting to see. And I thought this last session again on senior enlisted combat medics really drew in the audience because so many of those audience members in uniform could identify with the problems they had to face. So many of the exhibitors have prior service and they're familiar with the problems. And so what you see here is a community that's representative of not only those of us that have served, but the kinds of things we need to do to get better in future combat operations.
So speaking of future combat operations, your comments this morning, we talked about recent conflicts that may not look anything like what we're expecting with a near peer or a peer competitor in the future. What is it that we need to be focusing on right now to make sure that we're ready to take on those challenges of large-scale combat operations that we haven't seen for decades?
Yeah, I'm big on technology, but the first thing I would say, Doug, is training and education. I would love to see everybody who goes to war at the basic EMT, I'd love to see them, a lot of them gain ATP, Advanced Tactical Practitioner status out of Special Operations Command. If that's my son or my daughter on the forward edge of the battle area, and I know I've got well-trained senior medics out there, it gives me peace of mind that she's in good hands. I believe that now, but I think it's in pockets where there's real pockets of expertise, and it's like putting peanut butter on bread, Doug. I don't want just globs of peanut butter, I want to have it smoothed over where that quality of care pre-hospital on the battlefield is good across the board.
So talking about that pre-hospital care, one of the things that we're concerned about is prolonged field care, where you're not able to get people to the next echelon of care as soon as we could in the past. Yeah. Now, in America, we don't have the opportunity to do that in real time because we don't have that problem, maybe some remote areas. How do we leverage technology? How do we use simulation? How do we get everyone trained to the point where they have that covered?
Yeah, I think for simulation training, we have to find better ways to ensure the training is endured. The decay curve doesn't go steep on us over time. So what can we do? Hip pocket training, availability with YouTube videos and things that are accessible that you carry with you, right? The proverbial hip pocket training. When I was a young doc, I carried the Washington manual. That saved my butt many a day
I did too.
on the
That was
ward.
a big...
You always carried that, right? Well, imagine now with all these incredible, from the Joint Trauma Registry, you have all these incredible cases that we've documented. And what they just commented on is, what if I could run through a real case? And they play it out in the way, okay, you come across a guy unconscious, don't know if there's closed head injury, breathing, not well, thready pulse, you don't know if there's a tension pneumonia, whatever. What would you do? What's your first step? And so having that kind of encounter with these training tools where there's someone really experienced with it, you can ask questions. This fireside chat that now takes place with real problems, real cases that existed, and someone there to help you think through, what would you have done now? What are you thinking about? It just, I think, inspires the learner. And so training and education is the first thing to focus on through technologies like cell phones and tablets and repositories with YouTube videos or some kind of really exciting training tool that draws young people, whether it's video games or et cetera. And this is nothing novel. It's just important to emphasize that and to make sure that we're at least hitting that mark with training and education. In terms of technology, I'm really interested in unmanned casualty evacuation, air or ground. I showed a video this morning where in Ukraine they're using one of those plastic sleds with a casualty being pulled by a ground robot, a UGV, that has 12 miles per hour. It's pulling a casualty through the snow of Ukraine into safe space. That robot can pull about 4,000 pounds almost, and it's an incredible robot that has incredible capabilities. That's one area of interest, unmanned ground vehicles. The other is unmanned air vehicles. Right now, blood transport through an unmanned aerial vehicle, taking it from a forward operating base, drop off roll 3, drop off another 20 units, 10 lunch boxes of 2 units for dismounted medics or soldiers, taking that to a roll 1 to the forward edge of the battle area. To me, that's going to be really important. And I'm not going back empty. When I drop off all that blood, I'm putting a CASEVAC, a human, on there. Make sure that they're well sedated. If I have just IV, non-invasive sensors, I've got an air to ground data link in the drone, unmanned aerial vehicle going back to the roll 3 facility with this CASEVAC. Knowing that I'm receiving docket roll 3, I see what's coming in, I can adjust the infusion pumps. I need to give a little more fentanyl or ketamine. I need to go up on the norepinephrine, because those types of things far forward. As an intensivist, I can use norepinephrine. Not too many medics far forward are going to use that drug, and it's not an easy drug to know how to use. So we all know about hanging blood, we all know about IV fluids, but these kinds of other drugs that can be used, if used properly, I think will extend the golden hour, and that's all we're trying to do. I'm not into golden days or golden weeks. I'm just get this casualty to an OR where that non-compressible torso hemorrhage can truly be fixed surgically. That's where I'm at.
So how far do you think we are from that reality, and what are the major hurdles that we have to overcome to get there?
Well, it's going to take money, obviously, but there's a lot of, in Ukraine right now, there's over 200 companies making drones. This is coming from the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Fedorov. They're incredibly talented, smart people doing whatever it takes, whether it's a small drone, dropping a bomb. The reason this is important, when I was in London a couple of weeks ago talking to the British Naval Forces, I'm thinking, are battleship carrier groups, are they a thing of the past? Because you've got all these drones coming at you in the Red Sea from the shipping hazards with the Houthis, launching rockets in. And so I said, how do you counter that? He said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to have fast ships, corvettes and littoral ships, that will be a little faster maneuverable, and they're all hauling a barge. On the back of the barge is like 1,000 little drones. Right. So if you're a jet coming in for a low strike on the ship, they launch 100, 200 drones at one time. Good luck flying through that. The same, with other missiles coming in. It'll find a way to find the missile and have it blow up before it hits the ship. And so the whole use of drones, whether it's defensive, as I mentioned, with a barge carrying 1,000 drones, for example, and they have to be inexpensive to do that, or it's a big drone that has a 400-pound payload that has an 80-mile range that I can take 1 or 2 walking wounded, or those casevacs that are completely sedated, and clear the battle space. We've got to clear the battle space, otherwise it becomes really challenging to hold on to 10, 20, 50, 100 casualties. Who's going to watch these casualties when you're fighting the fight on that forward edge? So clearing the battle space with drones, to me, I can see it clearly. I think it has to happen. I think it has to happen for unmanned casevac for casualty flow. In addition, and I'm not going there empty and going back empty. I take blood, I take Class 8 medical logistics forward, I go back with somebody to clear that battle space.
So you have a big experience with telemedicine, and we're kind of on the forefront when that came on the scene, and you've been involved with it for several decades.
Yeah, 30 years.
30 years. Right. So what are some of the major lessons that we've learned with telemedicine over that time, and what is needed to get us to the next level of telemedicine in the future?
I deployed to Somalia in January of '93 with telemedicine, and I took a 1.5 megapixel Kodak camera with a satellite dish and an Apple Macintosh computer using a 9600 baud Inmarsat satellite. 9600 baud up, 9600 baud. Took forever to move these high quality images. We've come a long way. And the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, certainly accelerated the acceptance of telemedicine because there was no plan B.
Right.
Everyone stayed away and they used telemedicine. That heightened acceptance. Now, in my mind, what we have to do is, how do I do voice to text? I say I'm looking at a casualty. Doug, let's say you're down the ground. He's unconscious, he's breathing 50 times a minute. I have a thready pulse. I don't see any exit wounds from bullets or fragments. What do I do? That voice to text through some kind of, and I'm not going to go to the cloud because that electronic signature tells the bad guys, here I am. But if I'm able to go through ChatGPT then, imagine if I could store some of that repository of information on a cell phone that has incredible storage capacity. It's now telling me, I'm not hitting with my pen, scroll down menu, hit mail. That's just too clunky. I need to be able to talk what I'm seeing, convert it into text, get it into some program that goes through this ChatGPT that tells me, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And as you talk more and figure it out, because now you're doing your full assessment. You're looking at airway, breathing, circulation. To me, it's going to be that kind of system of the future where telemedicine is going to be autonomous care at the site of injury, pre-hospital, without going up to the cloud, with minimizing the electronic signature as much as possible.
So where are we with the diagnostics, the wearables that will feed the data, that hard objective data of respiration rates, maybe give you some ultrasound data?
Yeah.
Where are we with that technology?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what is the soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine willing to wear? Because good luck pasting stuff on me. I think a lot of times if they all like the Apple Watch or they like some other wearable device, the Samsung Watch, and I can make that watch useful for me as a doc, trying to take care of my soldiers on the battlefield, I think that kind of acceptance is important. And then what we want to do then is, and we're funded at University of Pittsburgh on this particular project called Raptor, looking at pre-hospital. What that program is, we do put a wearable on the casualty, goes through a variety of biosensors through signals. So the biosignal I'm looking at, the pulse pressure variation, stroke volume variation, kinds of things I can get from a pulse oximeter waveform. You can interrogate the waveform. How does that waveform change with respirations? How does the peaks of that waveform differ? You can learn a lot from that. And from there, you can begin to see how best to treat this casualty through that kind of wearable device. What we try to gain from that technology on a casualty, this is triage, can I put that casualty on an unmanned drone and fly for 30 minutes with nobody on board, where I know this casualty is not going to decompensate on me? So what I'm looking at in one of our projects is a wearable device that's predictive. This guy or gal is stable. From what I know from the thousands of patients I already have taken care of, I have pretty high confidence this guy is not going to crash on me if I put them on an unmanned drone. Versus, I have another casualty that I'm looking at, and the technology is telling me this guy's not fully resuscitated. You don't want to put this guy or gal on that drone. To me, that's going to be important. And that could be manned or unmanned drone, because once you take off, you're in the line of fire and you're just going through some rear echelon retreat to get the casualty to some kind of care, whether it's a Role 1 or Role 2 facility.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of the experienced clinician just looking at a patient and can tell this guy is sick,
right,
or not.
Right.
You want to be able to know,
yep,
is this the one we're going to worry about, or is this one we can safely place in this pathway?
Amen to that, Doug. I was an adult pulmonary critical care, and I did during my internal med training at Walter Reed a lot of ER medicine, and I'm taking care of kids, and I'm like, yikes! But one of the things I learned by hanging out with really experienced pediatricians, when I walk in that room, and this is like a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, they're not talking much, and if they look at me, and as I walk around the room and they're tracking me with their eyes, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
If I'm standing there and I'm walking around and they're fixated, looking straight ahead,
that's bad.
That's bad, right. So it's that kind of thing. I mean, I can just do one of these after a while and say, this doesn't look right. But how do you teach that? How do I teach medics to have that kind of insight? It's really hard, and it all comes down to, as much as I like modeling and simulation, it comes down to hands on patients in whatever it's a civilian hospital, VA hospital, or a DoD hospital. You've got to have hands on patients and taking care of them. And it's only through that experience that you gain that, that imperceptible knowledge, that just sort of is instinct now.
So we're currently at the Operational Medicine Symposium, and a lot of times these meetings kind of have a generalized theme year to year. Mm-hmm. Is there a theme that's emerging from this year's meeting?
We try to make it better every year based on feedback from the audience. And I mentioned that in the opening comments this morning. This year we had a wonderful session with senior NCO medics with, like I said, 120 years of experience. That was invaluable. The other thing we added this year is burns. In large-scale combat operations, there's going to be a lot of burn care that you're going to have to address. The other thing I'm trying to promote for next year, and I teased it this morning, was autonomous care. Where are we with that when we talk about innovations and technologies? We're still several years off, I think, on some of it, like the unmanned air. I think that's going to be a challenge. We're still for a ways off. We're completely autonomous, where I put you on an unmanned air vehicle and you fly off and the computer's treating you on its own with no human in the loop. That fully autonomous care, I think, is going to be hard maybe to get through the FDA initially. So I start off with our research and the FDA and this new funded project where I'm saying, okay, I want to do human in the loop just to get it through the FDA as software as a medical device. Then over time, with more data and more testing, I can then show that you don't really need the human. The human is not adding anything that the computer hasn't already figured out. But to get the FDA and senior commanders on board with that can be a challenge. And so I think it's like anything, like starting medicine in the elderly. You crawl, walk, run, right? Start low and go slow. And I think, unfortunately, for some of these things, it's going to take time. Look, I took telemedicine to Somalia 32 years ago, but it took a pandemic to really get it to be used much more fully, not so much in the DoD, but across the civilian sector. And these unmanned CASEVACs, these autonomous care systems, it's going to take, I think, 5-10 years before we really embrace it as an important way to augment care in a pre-hospital setting.
So let's talk a little bit about your personal story and your pathway to military medicine. How did you originally get involved with Army medicine?
My dad was in the Army, World War II, Korean War, and I always valued his experience. My uncles, I've come from that generation where uncles, dads, moms were in World War II, Korean War, and I always liked the military a lot, and so I wanted to be a doctor, but I goofed off a little too much as an undergrad, and I needed to grow up a little bit. So coming in the military with a master's and a microbiology background gave me time as a medical service corps officer to get my act together. Working in a hospital in DC, I'm an O2, it's an O6 position he put me in because my predecessor got into a food fight with the chief of pathology, so he's gone. I'm in there processing a stool for ova and parasites. Next thing I know, I'm in charge of this 40-person microbiology lab at a major medical center. And so it gave me this incredible perspective on my abilities, and I started to become much more thoughtful and purpose-built, and decided then that I'm now ready to become a doctor and go to med school, and I did. After 3 years, I got into med school and became a physician, and had some of the most incredible mentors as a young doc at Walter Reed. It was the golden age. I came in, it was 1,200 bed hospital. Now I think it's like 100, 200 patients. There was so much going on there, and I had so many wonderful colleagues coming from these most amazing schools, and the experiences we had were so wonderful. We were all busy. It was, during Gulf War I, then OEF, OIF. I stayed through all of those different situations with our military and our patient care, and it was very rewarding. But it all started off, just wanting to be a doctor and seeing how the military can give me the purpose of mind and the commitment to execute the way I knew I could. But I just needed to grow up, Doug, and here I am.
So you had a really distinguished career in military medicine. You kind of just told us what kept you in uniform for a while. Yeah. You've been out in the civilian sector, you're still connected with military medicine, but is there something that you miss? What do you miss about military medicine being in uniform on active duty?
Yeah, I really miss not seeing patients. My wife is a physician in Bethesda, Maryland. My job's in Pittsburgh. I commute between Pittsburgh and DC a lot. It's hard to be a doc taking call when you just want to sleep in your own bed at night, and I'm not getting any younger, and I decided to stop practicing medicine. So to answer your question, what do I miss? I really miss patient care. I like that a lot. I miss being around soldiers. I like that a lot. I just find them so resourceful, and I have great confidence in this generation of soldiers that I've been around. I know there's all these feelings about, this 14-year-old kid just carjacked somebody in DC, and you hear these stories, but I see other situations that makes me very hopeful and optimistic about our youth, about our country, and I try to stay optimistic, and I'm grateful that the military gave me that exposure. And when you're in that band of brothers, where you all share that mission first kind of mindset, it makes it very special. I'm not doing it for the money, I'm doing it because it's a faith that I believe in with people who I believe in. And I learned a lot from that, and I will always value that. Whether I was downrange or at Walter Reed, there was so much that I learned on a daily basis. And even now, I clearly don't know it all. I have so much more to learn. And what I find is I go from autonomous care, robots, to TBI, to directed energy. I'm thrown into all these different topic areas that are really relevant to the future medical care that we need to provide our military. And I'm still so excited because I'm learning new things all the time with people who are very talented and who understand ways to potentially solve these tough problems.
One of the things on WarDocs is we get some high schoolers and college folks that actually listen to the podcast, and they're pluripotential cell. They can go anything. What advice would you give to one of these younger folks, part of the next generation, if they had any interest in serving in military medicine, any capacity, corpsman, medic, nurse, doc, PA, the whole spectrum?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them specifically?
Yeah, I would tell them, don't become disheartened over the current state of military medicine. It's in a tough place right now. Tough place in that the census is low, a lot of the beneficiaries left, the active military hospitals, they all went out on civilian care. I would tell the young people that it's going to get better, that you will still have an enriched start to your life working with people who are mission focused, who have selfless service to others. And there's nothing higher in my mind than being a caregiver in a military setting, providing selfless service to others. It's inspiring to me, and it should be to most people, I think. And whether you come in as a medic, be mindful that if you really like it and you do well, you can go to med school. I had a tough time, with my college degree. I did okay, but it wasn't good enough for med school. But it was that 3 years as a medical service corps officer applying myself. So just because you may not have what you think you should have at 18 or 21 years of age, be relentless, pursue it with great passion, and be optimistic that you can do it. Don't let anybody tell you no, is what I would tell them. And do what you can do with what you got right now, and continue to do everything you can to get better as an individual and as a soldier.
We've been speaking with Dr. Ronald Poropatich on WarDocs podcast in collaboration with OpMed TV. Ron, thanks again for your time. Thank you for your service, and just enjoyed listening to your experience and wisdom.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it very much.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to this special episode of WarDocs, made possible by a partnership with the Defense Strategies Institute's OpMed TV. To stay connected with Team WarDocs, visit our website at wardocspodcast.com. Follow us on social media for updates and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel for more engaging content. Your support helps us continue to document the experiences and contributions of military medicine professionals as we honor the legacy and preserve the history of military medicine for the next generation.